This is what I love about peace and resistance. People want to move and get stuff done. Our kaupapa that we have for this morning is to continue with our program. But kia kaha ki kōrero, kia kaha ki te whakakipakipa. Be the catalyst, be the conscience, be present. So, I can see myself on the TV. Oh, now I'm going to be all fluffy now. When I didn't see myself, I was in my vibe, but now, okay, feeling a little bit shy. Kei te pai. I've let the karakia. We're now ready for our next session, and I probably need a paper. Yes.
Sorry, there was one housekeeping phone that's up on the podium.
Ah. Someone's phone was left in the wharekai. Oh, young fella. Bye. So you're at home when people aren't taking your phone. Let's go. Okay. I have a bio here for our first speaker, and I'll read it out and I'll say something extra. Dr. Ruakere Hond. Dr. Ruakere Hond has spent his lifetime as a passionate advocate for Parihaka, te reo me ōna tikanga o Taranaki. He is committed to uphold the peaceful legacy of Te Whiti o Rongamai and Tohu Kākahi, the two prophets who led the passive resistance movement at Parihaka in the mid to late 1800s. Ruakere is one of our foremost leaders of Parihaka. He is very responsible for revitalizing our language and culture, maintaining the traditions of Parihaka. Many of us have been taught by Ruakere. Many of us have been guided by Ruakere. And his CV is something that is held dear by the mainstream, but who he is as a person, as a brother, an uncle, a scholar and a leader for us at Parihaka. He is that person that we look up to for leadership in hard times, and honoured to have him recorded. I would love to have him here today, but like many leaders, he's constantly busy. So I acknowledge Kelli for getting him and being able to have something that he shared with us for our presentation and the start of our keynote speeches today. So kia ora koutou, kia kaha ki te whakarongo mai ki ana kōrero. Ka pai.
Kua hari, kua koa, kua tū te tikanga, kua haurangi katoa mai te ao nei e. Ai, kua haurangi te ao. Haurangi ana i te riri, i te mua, i te mau āhara, horapa te ao. Engari, kei konei, tātou, i te ikaroa Māui. Te ikaroa Māui te whenua e tūnei tātou, te ikaroa Māui te whare i tūnei mo Māui tiki tiki a taranga, engari anō mo Māui pōmare. Māui pōmare i whakatō i te hauora i wanga i ona iwi. Māui pōmare i whakawā i te hara o te pakanga i runga o Waitara. Māui pōmare i reira i te wā i whakaeke mai ngā hoia i tēnei rātonu, te 5 o Noema, i reira ia tamariki ana me te rā kōrero kua hari kua koa. Nō reira, e mihi ana ki a koutou, tātou tahi nei i te kaupapa te maungārongo, ki runga i te whenua o tira ki tāua te tangata. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Acknowledging everyone that's here in this conference today. Sadly, I was unable to be here. I had another kaupapa I needed to attend to, but I was given this opportunity to record a kōrero to be able to present it to you. Nō reira e mihi ana. When I first was given the opportunity, my first reaction was to focus in on a historical background of tohu and te whiti, to provide a background of Parihaka, and perhaps even the battles and the wars that took place within Taranaki. But I know that in the hui, you're ably provided that kōrero by Tonga, Puna and others that will be a part of this conference. So I'll leave the historical kōrero to them, and they are certainly able to provide that. What I have decided to talk about is something that has been ongoing within me in relation to tohu e te whiti, and I'd like to talk about that here. The kōrero that I'd like to speak about is the way in which tohu and te whiti are not history. That if we think about Parihaka as history, we are failing to recognise they have history, but they are not history. Their legacy survives today within this generation. And so to that extent, they are very much alive in our lives. But the feeling I have, the deep sense of dread, I have to say, and I'm outing myself, and I can only talk about myself. I'm not going to talk about how others may perceive this. The dread that I feel is that tohu and te whiti are being killed, that they are dying as we speak, unless we fail to recognise the legacy that they have left. And when I speak about them dying or them being killed, they are obviously I'm talking about the memory, the feelings that we have for them, and the mātauranga, the knowledge that their legacy still provides us today. So what is this? How are they being, that legacy, how is it being diminished? I see it in the context of Palestine, and those who know me and know others as well who also have similar views, Palestine holds significant relevance for Parihaka. And I'd like to talk about that because quite often what happens when we talk about Palestine, and not just in Parihaka but outside in our community, the feeling is that who's listening to us when we talk about Palestine? What impact does our voice have in what is taking place overseas? And why are we jumping on this bandwagon simply because this is what's in vogue at the moment is to talk about this genocide that is taking place overseas? And I don't see it in that way. So the first thing is that when we think about Palestine as being far beyond us, the most common response is we don't have our own backyard organised. We can't talk about that which is overseas when we don't have our act together. And so we should focus on our own needs, on things that we can have an impact on within Aotearoa, within our region. I feel, however, that argument is a slippery slope, because the moment we start speaking like that, then we start thinking things such as Taranaki shouldn't be talking or shouldn't have a perspective or ideas about things that take place in other regions. And when we start thinking like that, Taranaki hasn't got its act together. There are many things that need to be resolved within our rohe. So until those things are dealt with, well, then we should start speaking to other regions. And you can see the slope that I'm talking about. That the moment Parihaka starts thinking, we can't talk about iwi issues. Parihaka isn't an iwi. We are made up of iwi, but we are not an iwi. We are not sitting at the table with iwi leaders. And so we shouldn't talk about things such as exploitation of natural resources, about seabed mining and the like, about what's happening in the education system or what's happening in the justice system, because Parihaka doesn't have its act together. We don't have the structures in place to be able to respond appropriately to those things. So that's up to iwi. And then the next thing is we can't talk about issues outside of the gates of the reservation that is Parihaka. So the moment we go outside those gates, that's another space. We need to focus in on what is taking place within our community, within our reservation. And then if we start thinking like that, then I start thinking, and Parihaka's different in that we have multiple marae. We have homesteads that act as marae. They are the tūranga waiwai for people that have historical whakapapa into Parihaka. And those multiple marae, let's say me on my marae there, one of my marae there, as Taki Tutu, I can't talk about other marae on Parihaka when I know that at Te Paipai o Te Raukura, we don't have ourselves sorted. We have many things that we need to deal to. And so until we get that right, well then I can start to talk about and to have thoughts and share my ideas for other marae. The next stage is I can't talk about other whānau. My whānau, our whānau don't have our act together. There are many things wrong with how we function. We have our problems, so many problems, and so who are we to talk about other whānau or have an idea or have a thought about what's taking place for other whānau? And then finally, I think it's pretty obvious what the last point of the slope is, and that is, who am I to talk about another person? Who am I to have thoughts or ideas or voice concerns about what is taking place for another person when I don't have my act together? I can't talk in support of another person. I can't provide support for another person when I have all my problems. I have skeletons in my closet as much as even. I'm not perfect. I can't act because I am not able to say that I am in a position of strength. This to me is the dilemma that goes around in my mind as I raise concerns around things, as I try to encourage people to connect the dots, that what is taking place overseas is in actual fact what took place in Parihaka. Okay, it's not at the same scale of what took place in Parihaka, and that the 4 or more years that we were occupied and the men that were taken away as prisoners that become the main focus, when in actual fact the women, the children and the old people that were left in Parihaka are the ones who really had to cope with the stress of being occupied by soldiers, the abuses that took place, the diseases that ran through our community, the disempowerment, the destruction of buildings and facilities and capabilities that they had at the time prior to this day on the 5th of November. What is the connection of what took place there with what is taking place overseas? What I'm saying and what I'm feeling is that once we cease to see the relevance of what is taking place overseas, the moment we stop thinking about that, the moment we start feeling an empathy, a connection, and want to speak out about what is taking place in other places, is the day that legacy that has been left to us by Tohu and Te Whiti starts to diminish. It starts to evaporate. It starts to disappear. With the forgetting begins, the feelings start to be lost to us, start to vanish, and then ko tai ki te wā kei te whakaaro tātou mō tātou anaki, we start to think just about our own needs. Nō reira, he akia ki tēnei ki tō koutou hui, tō tātou hui. Perhaps this is something that over the length of the conference you can think about and help me with this dilemma. I'm not challenging any individual. I am struggling to deal with the way in which we are able to speak as Parihaka about issues that are taking place in the world. Nō reira, tēnā tukua mai o koutou whakaaro, wānanga hia tēnei kaupapa, te rā nō pēr he hua ka puta i tō koutou hui. Mōku o ti rā mo te Parihaka taunga o ngā mātua. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. kua hari.
That's Ruakere, scholar, language extraordinaire in terms of revitalising our reo, leader of custom and protocols, critical thinker. And I think just centering our hui from a personal space that he shared with us is a good way to start, and thinking about beyond your borders. And for us, Parihaka exists as a concept, as a papakainga. Also, there's a spirit there that drags people into it. We're hoping that is affecting you today as well. Ka pai. Okay, the lady of the moment, acting all quiet in the background there. Kelly and I go way back since I started my journey in peace studies. Learning about her tupuna, Te Maiharoa, and the many prophets that have emerged through the historical landscape in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and their ability to bring people together in the name of peace. Kelly has walked the footsteps of her tupuna and many others, and her vision with others to have our hui here in Taranaki, I really want to acknowledge that. She is the Co-General Secretariat for the Asia Pacific Peace Research Association, mokopuna of the last tohunga and Māori prophet in the South Island, and provides strategic kaupapa Māori leadership for Capable New Zealand, Otago Polytechnic. As an academic, Kelly mentors on the doctoral program, is a recognised peace and Indigenous rights scholar and educator. Homai te paki paki, more Kelli Te Maiharoa.
Kia ora koutou. Ko papa atu nuku rātou, ko tangaroa, ko ranginui, tēnā koutou. Ko kuro Taranaki maunga, ku tonu. He mihi mai o hā ki te iwi o Taranaki. Ki te Aotearoa, te mana whenua o tēnei whenua, tēnā koutou katoa. He mihi nui ki te whare mahana Ōwae Marae, tēnā koe. Ka huri ki te ao marama, te iwi o IPRA, tēnā koutou katoa. Ēnā mana, ēnā reo, ēnā rau rangatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Ko waio, ko auraki, rātou, ko tokomaru, ko Taranaki, ko Pirongia, o Kumaunga. He uri ahau no uruao me tainui waka. Ko Waitara, rātou, ko Ngāti Rāroa Aotearoa, ko Taranaki, ko Ngāti Maniopoto, ko Ngāti Apakura o ku iwi. Ko Puku Tapu me Kāti Rākai tōku hapu. Ko Te Maiharoa, ko Tāre Te Maiharoa, rawa ko Kapuranga Iriwai, me Arama Karaka, rawa ko Mere Wirihana o ku Mātua Tipuna. Ko Kelli Te Maiharoa hau, ko Tony Howison Peacock, taku taina. Warm Pacific greetings to you all. In my welcome, I acknowledged our Earth Mother, Papa Tuanuku, Ocean Father, Tangaroa, and Sky Father, Ranginui, as our founding parental deities. And then mihi tu Koro Taranaki, who stands behind us, our ancestral mountain, who is the living korowai or cloak of protection, watching over us. I then acknowledge the tribes of Taranaki and especially Te Aotearoa, who hold the mana whenua, the power and the prestige of this sacred land that we rest upon today. I whispered to our ancestors and friends who join us with spirit and spirit today. May they rest eternally in peace. I then acknowledged this beautiful whare, Ōwae Marae, and Te Aotearoa people who are graciously hosting us today. As a First Nations Waitara grandmother, co-chair of the International Peace Research Conference, and co-general secretary of Asia Pacific Peace Research Association, it is my absolute honour and pleasure to warmly welcome you here today. For you, as Matua Rawiri said before, you are now not only manuhiri or visitors to Aotearoa of the long white cloud, but you have been officially welcomed to be part of our wider whānau, no mai haere mai. As Dr. Hond just shared with you, it is only tika or right that we locate our stories within the landscapes and communities that we come from, to own our own narratives, to invest time and energy within our own whānau, our tribes, our mob, our community, so that they may be healthy, abundant and vital. My ancestral roots are deeply connected to 4 significant historical Māori landmarks. The militia invasion at Rangi Aowhia in Waikato, 1864, the Arawhenua movement of Te Heke, 1877, the passive resistance movement at Parihaka Pa, 1881, and the mana of the Māori prophetic movement, which included more than 60 Māori prophets from 1820 onwards. And of course, today is our very special day, Parihaka Day, the day that the militia invaded this beautiful pacifist Māori village here in Taranaki. And unfortunately, we weren't able to be there today because of infrastructure problems, or ongoing infrastructure, I should say. So I stand here today as a morahu, a survivor of Māori resilience. I come from a long line of peacekeepers, peacemakers, and active resistors to colonial domination. My ancestor Te Maiharoa, as Tonga said, was the last tohoka spiritual priest and Māori prophet of the South Island. His descendants, my ancestors, were strategically married into other tohoka or priestly lines, binding our southern whakapapa with the northern whakapapa of Taranaki and Tainui tribes. My great-great-grandfather, Arama Karaka, played an important role locally here in Waitara by bringing the Taranaki chiefs together to meet Governor Grey at the Waitara Harbour and also at Opunaki. My koro would not have dreamt that by welcoming strangers onto our shores, that the entire Māori world, as he knew it and his people knew it, would be totally dismantled within a couple of decades. Dr. Hond reminds us that the focus on Waitara, where we are today, is important, given the numerous attempts by Te Aotearoa people to negotiate peaceful solutions. But the government was determined to create conflict, which led to New Zealand colonial wars in 1845 to 1872, very near us today, where the British attacked Te Kohi Pa on March the 17th, 1860. This event then led to the pan-tribal pacifist settlement of Parihaka Pa, and I'll leave that kōrero for Tonga and Puna to share with you soon. My nanny, Mere Wirihana, connects me to the historical event at Rangi Aowhia, just north of here in the Tainui Waikato region. Rangi Aowhia was an important agricultural village where Māori provided the food for the settlers and militia. On Sunday, the 21st of February, 1864, a day of worship, British forces arrived unexpectedly and suddenly attacked our people, the Ngāti Apakura and Ngāti Hinetu people. Our people ran from them to seek shelter in the local village, in the local church, considered a holy place for our people. The soldiers opened fire on the church full of people, and then horrifyingly, the militia set the church alight with our people trapped inside. He tino mamai, he maumahara rātou, we remember you and may you rest in peace. For my southern family in Te Waiponamu, the South Island, on the 11th of August 1879, our peaceful ancestral Māori village at Te Ao Marama was invaded by militia, threatened and physically evicted from our ancestral homes, left to watch our village burnt to the ground. This is the scorched earth policy that was enacted then, to leave Māori with nothing to return. This event is known as Te Heke ki Te Ao Marama and was the first passive resistance movement in the South Island against colonisation led by Te Maiharoa, my great-great-grandfather. Now I share this dark history with you today, not for us to feel guilty about what has happened in the past, but so that we never forget what our ancestors went through, so that we carry their dreams forward into a more peaceful future. I was born only 1 century after the atrocities at Biennial, and 90 years after Te Ao Marama Kaik and Parihaka Pa were raised. Much of our history here in Aotearoa has been withheld from us as a young country that continues to suffer from historical amnesia. Despite the challenges of colonisation, my ancestors, our ancestors, continued to worship the deities of peace, including God and embracing Christianity. Our people grew communities of faith throughout the land through the pacifist teachings of Te Maiharoa, Te Witi and Tohu, the unity of kotahitanga with the kingitanga movement and the Ratana Hahi. Māori prophets were adaptive and resilient, mixing traditional Māori ways of knowing and being with Christianity to support their communities through unprecedented political, social, and cultural upheaval. These prophetic movements were survival tools, active resistance against the pressures of colonisation, and seeds for hope for the recovery of Māori and authority in our own land. We still hold that hope dear to our hearts. This evolution of spirituality, of cultural and political change, brings us all here together today to reimagine and strive towards a more peaceful and just society. So we welcome you. We welcome your energy. We welcome your ideas. We welcome your research expertise to make a difference, to make a contribution towards peace, resistance, and resilience, to strengthen the rich fabric of our unique histories and a shared future on this planet. Although there continues to be turmoil in the world where people and countries want to dominate and take over others, if we work together in the frequency and spirit of collaboration and gratitude, we can learn from these events and move towards enlightenment. We can consciously choose to engage with our families, friends, communities, and the living world in a way that uplifts and sustains the well-being of all on the planet. May this time that we spend together on whenua Māori, on Māori land, inspire you to ask questions within yourself and of each other, to consider how we can manifest sustainable, peace-based communities and societies. There is a greater source than ourselves, and that is the energy of aroha, of love. We're talking to a room of people, or even just one person. This has the potential to cause a ripple in the energy that radiates out from Waitara, from Aotearoa to the Pacific and all over the world. And in closing, I'll leave you with a proverb from my great-grandfather Te Maiharoa. Mahia te taha wairua, mama no te taha kiko. Take care of the spiritual side and the material side will take care of itself. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
E te tuahine te marae kura, e mihi ana ki tō kauhau te ata nei.
E wāhi ana rā koe nā kōrero ke hohouai te rongo ki roto ki tēnā me te mihi ki tō tupuna te Maiharoa. Wa maunua ke rā ia koe te tangi whai tōna rua, ko tū te kaupapa, ko hora te kōrero, ko tū te pono, tēnā koe. That's my MC duties done for the day. I'm going to hand it over to Nakutu.
Kia ora. Hare to follow. My name is Tracy Scott. I am based in Ōtautahi, Christchurch, which is in Te Waitākere, South Island. And I have the absolute privilege and honour to introduce the next four kōrero speakers. So I'd like to introduce Professor Matt Meyer, who is based in New York. Professor Matt Meyer is the current Co-Secretary General of the International Peace Research Association and a United Nations representative. He is an internationally recognised author, academic and educator, holding multiple top peace and reconciliation positions across several continents. I've had the pleasure of being online to see Matt. This is the time that I get to see him in person. So very honoured.
Yesterday, I had the privilege of visiting Parihaka Pa. We sat in a garden. We prayed in a cemetery. We broke some rules, apparently. We listened to bulldozers, but these were bulldozers of construction, building, and paving, everyday acts of actual construction. Yesterday at Parihaka. 144 years ago yesterday in Parihaka, we can imagine that there might have been similar everyday acts of a form of resistance known as everyday survival. November 4th, 1881. The day before the violent government invasion of the peaceful settlement known for bringing together diverse peoples in a community of nonviolent resistance. Today, I have the absolute privilege of being here with all of you. We have prayed in a language only recently revived, in a community still constructing spaces of peace, justice, and unity in diversity. I have the extraordinary honor and privilege of finishing my term as Secretary General of the International Peace Research Association in such a sacred space among such an extraordinary group of family. Words really cannot do justice to the feeling of being up here now. But it is worth putting into words the fact that calling you all family, and though none of you are biologically related to me, many of you know that our lives have long been intertwined in ways deeper than most traditional families. But calling you family is not a given or a common practice in an organization that is, in part, supposed to typify a professional, academic consortium. Recognizing our roots of everyday resistance may not seem central to the researching conflict resolution solutions, and yet these acts of resistance and reconciliation, our acts, seem more important to recognize on some days, on these days, than the research that make up some of our livelihoods. It is also then worth putting into words that I realize a certain pride in the number of people gathered here today, some simple participants and other people who will be keynote speakers in the days to come, with a common question and concern. I have to confess, Matt, many have confessed to me, I have to confess that I'm not really a traditional academic. I am proud that IPRA understands that part of the process of decolonizing the academy, part of decolonizing our peace movements, our peace organizations, our peace research methodologies, and ourselves, part of that is found by embracing what we have already always known and long asserted was part of our vision, but too often forgotten in our practice. Our work can only be effective and meaningful if we are a combined force of scholars and students, of researchers and community activists, committed to learning from one another. So just as I and we are welcomed here by our new brothers and sisters, just as IPRA welcomes all of you here, whatever your curriculum vitae, whatever your resume says, whatever your experiences are, or how many advanced degrees you may have, from bastions of academic privilege, of knowledge power, as the settler colonizers and capitalists have over the resources found, the same way the settler colonists have found the resources in the lands that were never theirs to own to begin with. The path to deepen IPRA's leadership in a peace with justice, in a peace that we recognize is the harder way, was truly forged or began to be forged 60 years ago, as this very special association was founded with an understanding that theory and practice, scholarship and the actual struggle for peace must go hand in hand. Our founders, with all their glorious visions and human faults and frailties, constructed an organization that would be majority global South-based, that would include gender parity as a principle in its governing bodies. We're still trying to figure out what the gender non-binary piece of that is going to be. That we have a grassroots, autonomous, regional, and democratic approach rather than a top-down centralist one. Today, this week, we continue to deepen those radical visions by holding this first ever Global Peace Studies Conference to be held entirely on Indigenous land, under the leadership of our extraordinary Maori family. But it is not just the venue or the history, as has been said, that we celebrate today. In order for this work to have ongoing meaning, we must commit personally and professionally, organizationally and collectively, to understand that an effective 21st century peace studies must always look deep into the indigenous roots of peacemaking, lessons embedded in so many peoples and places everywhere on the planet. That we must root ourselves in the African Sankofa notion of looking back in order to look forward. Never just looking back, never just honoring the elders, but also the youth in understanding and learning from, in cherishing our histories while never getting stuck within them, or in the repetitive cycles of doing the same things while hoping for different results. We must always challenge ourselves lovingly, but forthrightly, including our privileges, like the privilege of white supremacy that still infects our institutions, the privilege of patriarchy that still sour our relationships, the privileges of unchecked capitalism that wreak barbarous havoc with all the various attempts at living life in cooperative, community-based, environmentally balanced peace. So we come together as people facing many different types of colonialism, external and internal, neo-colonialism, many different types of struggles for resistance, reconciliation in a way that is justice-based. We can love one another, including when we have earned the privilege of being together, like we will be together in this glorious week. But whenever those privileges lead to unearned power over one another, lead to the cycles of oppression and subjugation and genocide that we see growing, not diminishing, over these 60 years and in more than 1 or 2 places in the world today, we know that our work must deepen. Our resistance must grow. We must use this time together as a deepening. We must learn the lessons we're beginning to hear about peace being the harder way. Our survival as a human family depends upon it. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, very much. I'm definitely blessed to be a part of a global community where we are all striving to connect, learn, share, and build and grow from these places. I'd like to now introduce Emeritus Professor Kevin Clements, who I have had the honour and the blessing of knowing for 20 years. Professor Kevin Clements is currently the Director of the Toda Peace Institute, formerly called the Toda Institute for Global Peace and Policy Research. He was the Foundation Chair of Peace and Conflict Studies and Foundation Director of the National Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies at the University of Otago, New Zealand, and served as Secretary General of the International Peace Research Association. Hang on, I've got to turn the page. IPRA, President of the IPRA Foundation and Secretary General for IPRA's Asia Pacific region, IPRA. So Kevin, it's a real honour to welcome you to the stage. Good to see you again. Hariru.
In mana, in reo, in iwi, Aotearoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings to all of you from people of many voices, lands, and lineages. It's so wonderful seeing all of you here in this wonderful marae. And I have to say, looking out at you, I know many of you, but I know fewer than I used to know. And so I want to congratulate Kelly and Tony and all who've managed to bring together not only a new group of people, for me, these oldies from IPRA, but a very diverse group of people, and most importantly of all, a young group of people, because you are going to be the next generation. As you can tell from my white hair, I'm definitely the last generation. And it's always very sobering, kind of reflecting a little bit about that. But this gathering here and the fact that it is so diverse, I think, is in itself an act of resistance to Donald Trump. As you know, he's completely opposed to diversity, and here we have diversity. He's completely opposed to equality, and here in this marae we have equality. And he's completely opposed to inclusion, and we're including, not him, but all of us. In our struggle for a better world. I'd also just, since others are talking about Parihaka, I won't mention that, but I'd just like to honour the memory of Mata Parihaka, who was known to many of us. He was a great peace educator for Parihaka and who served her people with both talent and aplomb. Just as Maori ancestors on occasions like this just as Maori honor their ancestors on occasions like this, I want to acknowledge the ancestors of IPRA and all they gave to the formation of our field. Bert Rolling, these all probably names that most of you don't know. Bert Rolling, our first Secretary General, Johan Galton, Elise Boulding, and to our Women's International League for Peace and Freedom colleagues, Kenneth Boulding and John Burton. These five were the formidable scholars and practitioners and wonderful networkers and organizers who initiated the first IPRA conference in 1964. And they were, and all of us stand on their theoretical and empirical shoulders. Most of them, apart from the formidable Elise, as you can tell now, most of them were white. Most of them are from the north, were from the north. They were joined later by people like Adam Curl, Asfian Ida, Raima Varanen, Chad Alger, Betty Reardon, Yoshi Sakamoto, Birgit Brock-Hutner, and many others. They are our tribe, they're my tribe. And I just want to acknowledge them for all the wonderful work they did and for giving us the theoretical foundations of our field. All our IPRA ancestors developed their theories in the context of the Cold War, but soon realized that there would be no peace without justice. And this gave rise to a preoccupation with how to grapple with the corrosive effects of colonial repression and how to ensure liberation from all oppressive relationships. They were at the same time, they didn't lose sight of how to deal with direct violence, and I'm going to focus a little bit of attention on that. The Russian invasion of the Ukraine marked a new low, as does the Israeli genocide of Palestinians. Both are an insult to our common humanity, as is the ongoing slaughter in the Sudan. And I just want to take a moment here as a good Quaker to have a minute silence in acknowledgement of all those who've lost their lives in these unnecessary, preventable conflicts and violence. Thank you. All of their spirits, the spirits of all of those dead people are in this room as we speak. And are speaking to us about our humanity and our lack of humanity and the challenges to our humanity by every single one of these wars. We now have 61 state-based armed conflicts in 36 countries, which is the highest number in over 7 decades. So all of the work that was done in the past by our ancestors and by all of you at the moment seems to be for naught. It's so easy to feel disillusioned and depressed, and I am, by all the things that are happening around about us, over which we seem to have absolutely no control whatsoever. And so the big challenge that faces us is, and I've called my talk, how do we reimagine peace in a fractured world? IPRA and its founders were able to develop theories that worked in the past because there was a liberal international rules-based order, albeit biased order in favor of the West, and it was possible in that order to devise collaborative and rational solutions to the problems of the day. Regional and global institutions were not under attack and vilified as they are today. And even so, the United Nations was never able to fulfill its goals because of P5 dominance on the Security Council. But it was respected for its human rights and humanitarian work and rational evidence-based solutions to wicked problems. And that tradition continues, but that tradition itself of humanitarianism, of concern and philanthropy, and providing some solace and sustenance to those in very abject circumstances, that itself has now been undermined and is being undermined. None of our peace research ancestors could have imagined the chaos generated by the Trump 2 presidency. Nothing in our theory could predict what would happen when an extreme narcissist with sociopathic and psychopathic tendencies took control of the most powerful nation in the world, eliminated democratic checks and balances, and has become an elected despot. When insanity replaces rationality and the predictable is rendered unpredictable, our peace research theory and practice becomes severely challenged. Trump, unfortunately, isn't alone in his courage autocratic populist movements all around the world. As the 2025 VDEM report notes, the world now has 88 democracies of mixed quality, compared to 91 autocracies for the first time in over 20 years. And liberal democracies, of which this country is one, have become the least common regime type in the world, a total of 29 in 2024. Nearly 3 out of 4 persons in the world, 72%, now live in autocracies, which is the highest since 1978. This trend towards autocracy and despotism has been caused by and resulted in a merciless attack on freedom of expression, the subversion of civil society organizations, and challenged activism all around the world. This is having a major negative effect on freedom of the press, the freedom of universities and dissenters' ability to speak truth to power. I can't recall a moment in my lifetime when so many political leaders, led by Trump himself, and echo even here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, have made careers out of bald-faced lies. And talking about that, I was shocked to read in the Herald today that this government, a crazy coalition, has now decided to remove the Treaty Waitangi principles from the Education Act so that schools and universities and others will not be required to teach Treaty in their curriculum. We're all now living in a world of misinformation, disinformation, lies, and an unfortunate return to truth and claw realism and geopolitics. We're gathered here in New Plymouth at a moment of deep global division, polarization, and profound brokenness. Peace in 2025 seems to shimmer like a mirage just beyond our reach. There's so much to generate despair. We can identify different parts of the peace-building puzzle, but we often lack holistic visions. It's easy to feel despondent and defeated, and I do. But this is exactly the moment when peace research and peace practice, peace advocacy, and peace education matter most. In times of fracture and brokenness, new light enters the cracks and catalyzes new thinking. Our peace ancestors responded to their conditions by developing theory and practice suitable for their times. The challenge facing IPRA right now is how to respond positively to the bleak conditions we're confronted with. It's going to take all of our brain power, but more importantly, our peaceful and moral imagination to think of new ways of promoting nonviolent solutions to structural and direct violence. In moments of disillusionment, I want to argue, as my mentor, Elise Boulding did, that imagination itself becomes an act of resistance. You notice that all the dictators around the world are very down on creative actors, poets and writers and artists and religious and spiritual leaders. They have no place in this world that's currently being created. Elise Boulding, who gave so much IPRA, was a firm believer in imaging and imagining a world without war. So let's think of ways in which we might imagine real alternatives to the fear-based politics of the present. To take this idea a little further, in an age of fear and violence, the courage to envisage other nonviolent ways becomes revolutionary. In the first place, the reimagination of peace is to refuse despair and to be hopeful and courageous in the face of global challenges. Trump and his ilk like to generate paralysis in the face of these challenges. We need hope to counter that fear, that paralysis, and that despair. Second, it's vital that peace isn't seen as a distant utopia or a shaky ceasefire, but the active creation in the here and now of justice, empathy, care, and belonging wherever we are. It demands a politics of kindness and much more attention to building peaceful relationships at the micro, meso, and macro level. If you're wondering where you might begin, think about the person on each side of you and say, this looks like a good place. Peace isn't something given by the powerful, especially not by the autocrats. It's something grown relationally and locally through trust, truth-telling, personal and social transformation. Third, the reimagining of peace is to hear all the voices that have been too long ignored. We need to listen to all those who are unable to make their ends meet in this Darwinian world that we're living in. We need to pay attention to women peace builders who are our future, Indigenous guardians of the land, disillusioned youth, and all those displaced by violence and imminent climate catastrophe. The question we have to pose here in IPRA is, what would peace look like if all of these ignored voices were at the table? Fourth, what would global security mean if it weren't defined by realists, armies, and alliances, but by the well-being of the most vulnerable? In Aotearoa, we're constantly challenged and inspired by Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the treaty that still causes this nation to live in partnership, in a covenant with the Pakeha, in justice and shared authority. And from Maori thought, we have that deep sense of relationality and belonging, as has been described to us all over the past few hours. This reminds us that peace is not merely the absence of war, but the presence of right relationships between peoples and the land and with the future. It involves building strong, respectful, and reciprocal relationships that foster a sense of belonging, mutual obligation, and collective responsibility. Our well-being exists through positive rather than negative relationships. This is the essence of peace, not control, but connection. That's why we've got to replace cultures of violence with cultures of peace. That's why peace education remains as important now as it was when we first started teaching it in schools, universities, and in the community. For over 6 decades, IPRA has stood as a beacon for those who believe that knowledge and empathy can change the world. Our founders, such as Adam Curl, imagined peace research as a tool of transformation, a means of dismantling the structures that sustain violence and of constructing the relationships that sustain life. Today, that mission is more urgent than ever. We've got to reimagine the role of scholarship itself, not as an ivory tower pursuit, but as an act of engaged care and compassion. Just imagine what would happen to our curriculum if care and compassion were at its heart. We must reimagine, IPRA has always been more than an association, as Matt said. It's a movement of conscience, a global network of scholars and practitioners who refuse to accept that violence is inevitable and that conflict must end in domination, or that peace is the privilege of the powerful. So our work has to be decolonizing, it has to be feminist, it has to be inclusive, it has to be ecological. It must listen more than it lectures, and we all need to accompany those in need without objectification and abstracted empiricism. It's always very sobering to think about, why should we do this? I have metastatic prostate cancer, and my oncologist says, I might have 2 years to live. And that in itself is fairly sobering, but it also means, when I mention that to people, that I'm greeted by a well of empathy, of concern, and compassion. Each one of us is going to die. And so in terms of the thinking through our relationships with each other, how do we make sure that we treat each other as we would want to be treated at the end of our lives? The task is to ensure that knowledge doesn't simply describe reality, but reshapes it. This conference comes, therefore, at a very critical moment in global history. It's an invitation to challenge and rethink everything we assume about peace and power. We must cultivate what Joanna Macy calls active hope, the kind of hope that rolls up its sleeves, a hope that listens, heals, and persists, and a hope that holds both grief and determination in the same hand. As we begin our time together, let's remember that peace is not a destination, but a process, and it's already begun here over the last 24 hours. It's a daily practice of love, empathy, courage, and imagination. Let's learn from each other's research, but also from each other's humanity. In this room here, we have 200 people who each have stories to tell, grief to share, and joys as well. How do we respect and acknowledge and dignify all of that experience? So let's leave this conference not only wiser, but kinder, more grounded, more daring, and more ready to act. The New Zealand Maori poet Hongi Tupere once wrote, "I can hear the sea breathing, I am the wave." May we too be that wave, a global tide of compassion, creativity, and courage, flowing from Aotearoa to every fractured corner of the world. Thank you.
what you're saying. I love and really feel that Waitara on the idea of peace and connectivity and learning and sharing. And it does not escape me that the many of the tupuna that are seen around in this wharanui are showing battles that they have been in and fought. So I think it's only fitting that we remember the value of fighting for peace because it's been done and we're surrounded. I'd like to now introduce somebody that you have already had the honour of experiencing. Tonga Karena. Kia ora, is a Māori scholar and activist who holds the role of a Pātikanga at Tuaora Taranaki, providing cultural vision and leadership. As a tribal leader, Tonga provides expertise and revitalisation in the field of Parihaka Pa, pacifism, revolutionary non-violence, and Indigenous peace traditions within Aotearoa, New Zealand. Join me to do Puna at the same time. Kia ora, Puna. You would have heard Karena this morning. Puna was a presenter there, and she's an advocate for Te Ture Te Ōwatangi, Māori land issues, social justice, reconciliation, and Mātauranga Māori. As a Māori female leader, Puna is heavily involved in tribal and social development, government, local and central government advocacy, and grassroots community implementation. She is a general manager at Taranaki ki Waitara.
Can we have the mic, please?
I'm going to join further. No.
Ka pai. Scholar, leader. The leader in me is saying that it's lunchtime. And the scholar is me saying, keep talking Tonga, they'll listen. So, interesting tension. And I want to acknowledge the beautiful coho of Professor Kevin. I want to acknowledge everyone that's here and the kōrero that we've shared today and we'll be sharing. I feel that as a leader of our community, I've already succeeded in many ways. The success is having you here. The success is sharing the knowledge that you bring to our rohe. There's something inside me that yearns for all our people on the ground to hear your stories. That is the gap between the professors of the university and the professors of the street. To quote Stellan Vinhani. So I want to introduce my tuahine who've been working together in these spaces for a long time, formally, informally. And the divide and the tension between being a leader and a scholar, an activist, a pacifist, a peacemaker, revitalizing language, and navigating Crown processes to ensure that the legacy of Parihaka continues and thrives and doesn't exist only within the history books. So I'm really excited to share to my peace whānau, my tuahine Puna, and the wonderful achievements she brought to Parihaka, and to share how we've worked together in different spaces and continue to do so. We do have a PowerPoint, and we're going to try and rush it through because I know that bell is going to ring very soon. So I'm going to give the mic to Takutuehine, and yeah. Can you see the photos? Yeah. Okay. Just to note, well, I'm performing in a couple of weeks and I want to look like that guy. And so I'm thinking about my fashion, which is really important around emulating the way our tupuna dressed. And doesn't he look beautiful? And we see all the wahine doing their poe there at the opening of Te Miho in 1896. Yeah, anyway, ka pai. So I'm going to hand it over to Takutuehine, but we have come to a space where we are post-reconciliation in Parihaka, and that moment in time was driven through amazing leadership with Puna. Ka pai.
He pua wai au, noro ngai te tikanga, he ringa, noro ko I te rau, kura ko taku rau, kura e mana wanui ki te aue. Morena koutou, ana, ko Puna Aotearoa, Wano-Bryant tōku ingoa. Here on behalf of my family, my whānau, my sister Hinenui Te Pō. I carry the name Puna Aotearoa, which means the spring of love. My great-grandmother, Hinenui, my younger sister, carries the name of our grandmother, which means the goddess of death and the night, which is a beautiful space for us, as death is the most gentle, warm realm that you can ever enter, especially when there's an atua wahine, an ancestress waiting for you on the other side. Also here on behalf of my husband Aisha at the back, our 3 daughters, 1 son and 6 grandchildren. And I didn't give birth to all of those children, I'm just sounding very clever. We share whakapapa, as we all do with you. I sent Tony to the cooks, because if that bell rings, Tonga and I are Kwamatu, Kei Te Pai, excellent, ka pai. So we have a saying, ka tika mua, ka tika muri, everything works together, out the front and the back, but really it's out the back that sets the tikanga around here. So very grateful to be here with my tuakana Tonga, and as he said, we uphold cultural practices. We are tono and ngare, or servants of our people. We are there for them and love them, live for them, breathe for them every day. So when we're needed, we are there and we are here with you all today. Acknowledge Matua Rawiri and the whānau of Ōwae Manukorihi, this beautiful whare, Kelli Te Maiharoa. It's an absolute honour. Thank you, Tony. Thank you to our matua who spoke before us. So I was honoured to be in a season and time and purpose to be the chairperson of Parihaka Pa Trust Reservation at the time of the Parihaka Crown Reconciliation in 2017. My younger sister's now taken over part of the chairpersonship. Ko te mihi tuatahi ki te rao te puanga aroha o te pāua I tēnei rangi. It is the day that has been said and you've heard commemorates the plundering te pāua of Parihaka. Ruakere left the history to Tonga and I, and none of us are historians, so to speak. We just live what we say are the oral traditions and narratives and the values that flow from those handed down from our tupuna. So perhaps you might call us historians. So I just wanted to take us through the day before the 5th of November in 1881. And we call peace rongo, as you know, in the title of your conference. Rongo is the atua, the god of peace, and also cultivation. So you can't be at war and in the garden at the same time. And as you drove through Parihaka yesterday, you would have seen our urupa, our dead, on the right, the cemetery, and the garden on the left. And so rongo is also to listen more than we speak, because we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And also rongo mo is to hold on to, yes? So within that there is a deliberate commitment to peace. It is certainly not passive, although I understand the academic terminology is nonviolent passive resistance, Kei Te Pai, I'll leave that to you, but that's certainly not the way we describe rongo mo. It is a deliberate commitment and a discipline to the upholding of peace. The day before the invasion of Parihaka, Te Iti and Tu'u informed the people that there was a pending invasion and encouraged them to have discipline and uphold and continue resisting through peaceful means. It was said, our salvation today is stout-heartedness and patience. If any man thinks of his gun or his horse and goes to fetch it, he will die by it. By forbearance alone shall we be saved. Let the booted feet come when they like, the land shall remain firm forever. Shortly after 5 a.m. on the 5th of November 1881, John Bryce led 945 volunteers and 644 armed constabulary to Parihaka. They were met by 200 children, singing, performing haka. Older girls stood behind them, nearby skipping ropes. Residents later offered potatoes to the troops, who were forbidden to accept them. Bryce rode onto the marae on a white charger horse and demanded Parihaka's leaders for a response to the Crown's proclamation. No reply came. The Riot Act was read, declaring that those assembled must disperse within 1 hour or receive a jail sentence of hard labour. No one moved. And at the end of the hour, troops advanced further onto the marae and arrested Te Witi and To'u. And as he was arrested, Te Witi o Rongomai told his people to be of good heart and patient. Tohu Kaka said that if we looked for peace and find war, be steadfast, keep to peaceful works, be not dismayed, have no fear. It's important that we share that kōrero with you, and a lot of it is in Te Reo Māori that was translated into English, their proclamations. And that is in spite of interruption and injury, the inspiration that we as living descendants of those tupuna live by every day. In terms of the history, and I'm going to hand over to Tonga after this, we had a Crown apology given to Parihaka as a result of the reconciliation process. It was important for us that we understood that it was a Crown process and is fundamentally flawed because the parameters of that process are already set. But it was different from treaty settlements. It was a reconciliation process. So can you participate within a Crown process and resist at the same time? Yes. Can you confront systems that dehumanise and marginalise Indigenous peoples whilst choosing to participate in them? Yes. That is rongomo. That is shalom. That is the endless pursuit of identity, which has nothing to do with post-settlement governance entity, systems, structures, processes. Reconciliation and rongomo for us is a way of being, a way of behaving, a way of laying down peace and pain in exchange for peace. So I take you to the day of Puanga Haiata, the proclamation that our tupuna promised us, which was a new dawn and a new day. On the 9th of June 2017, the Crown apology is as follows. The Crown therefore offers its deepest apologies to the people of Parihaka for all of its failures, and in particular the following actions. For imprisoning Parihaka residents for their participation in the ploughing and fencing campaigns of 1879 and 1880, and for promoting laws that breached natural justice by enabling those protesters to be held in South Island jails without trial for periods that assumed the character of indefinite detention, for depriving those political prisoners of their basic human rights, and for inflicting unwarranted hardships on them and on members of their whānau and hapu, who remained behind and sustained Parihaka in their absence, for invading Parihaka in November 1881, forcibly evicting many people who had sought refuge there, dismantling and desecrating their homes and sacred buildings and stealing heirlooms and systematically destroying their cultivations and livestock, for the rapes committed by Crown troops in the aftermath of the invasion, and for the immeasurable and enduring harm that this has caused to the women of Parihaka, their families and their uri, their descendants until the present day, for the arrest and detention of tohu kākahi and Te Whiti o Rongomai, for 16 months without trial in the South Island, for the imposition of a pass system which regulated entry into Parihaka, denied residents the freedom of movement and prevented supporters from providing Parihaka with supplies following the invasion, for compounding these injustices by returning land under a regime that deprived owners of control and ultimately the ownership of much of the Parihaka reserves, and which remains in place to this day. Kai ake te tuakana.
That was a poignant moment that we were able to reach, knowing that in 1868, right up until 1881, we were a community that practiced and built peace. We lived according to the tribal narratives. We instrumentalized scripture. We combined it with tribal whakapapa genealogies. We gave birth to a syncretic movement that is unique in the ability to inspire many people who would landless from around the country. It found a pan-tribal community where we all lived together under the yoke of tohu and tawhiti. Our prophets struggled to share the message of peace. Not all of our followers were quick to pick up the message. Te Whetū Moia, who was one. Our prophets were uncle and nephew. They had significant blood ties with each other. Our prophets knew about the international events happening. They understood the currency of peace as being something that was beyond the shores of Aotearoa, similar to what Ruakere spoke about. To be inspired by tohu and tawhiti is to recognise that they saw that our narrative was to be shared with the world. So that 13 years culminating into today, November the 5th, was critical in terms of the era that faced Parihaka. The atrocities happened, but then we rebuilt. We modernised, we Europeanised, we used money as a form of exchange. We also suffered because one prophet came out of imprisonment before the other, dividing our community into two. And that division has been continuing, and only recently, in the last few years, has been reconciled. Our internal reconciliation, our own healing, has been put aside to manage the post-reconciliation context that we're in. I interviewed Puna for my PhD, and she says that we should have a moratorium. Part of that moratorium was the bruising effect that you're feeling today around Parihaka separating itself to rebuild itself. I make this comment that the physical infrastructure is one thing, but the socio-political infrastructure is another. Resonating with what Professor Clements spoke about in terms of reimagining peace, and what Ruakere spoke about as we think about Parihaka beyond our shores, reimagining our Parihakatanga. And what does that mean for us as a community is to give power to our voice, give power to our language, being able to reflect upon who we are in our own language. We have been othered for a long time. To know me is to know me through the reo of the colonizer, the language of the colonizer. Ruakere and I and others share the view that to be Parihaka is to speak the language of the prophets. How can we reflect upon their message when we're receiving translated messages from journalists, from historians? So we're at that critical space where, as we develop our legacy and reimagine who we are, peace and tribal narratives are being restored. So I think about what we're doing now, how the current landscape is unparalleled in terms of the autocratic regimes out there, and the extent to which Parihaka is challenging itself by reimagining who we are. The privilege to be part of this governance of Parihaka is that we get to be part of a Crown Leaders Forum that was inserted as a critical part of reconciliation, that we meet with the Crown every year. Looking forward to going to Parliament next Wednesday, to hang with Luxo, if he's apparently meant to be coming. And this is a unique feature that we get to challenge more than just filling our pockets with funding needs, making political statements. And I want to acknowledge the other co-chair of our trust, Emily, and my keyboardist, her husband, Oz, who are active in the activist scene. So it's interesting when you come to a hui at Parihaka, you have activists, you have religious fundamentalists, you have academics, and we're all pushing for that vision of reimagining what Parihaka is to be in the future. I think the resonance of this conference is going to spread to our community. There's going to be questions, there's going to be FOMO, there's going to be... So I think once Parihaka is set up, we probably want another one. And definitely be able to come back. And we have the co-chair, Hene Nui, who's also Puna's sister, who's also my singer in our band that we'll be singing on Saturday. So the albatross and the symbol of the albatross, the raukura, is what Rawiri spoke about today, that Te Aotearoa people hold dear. That symbol of peace that defines Parihaka and who we are. He ahara te manu, ko taku poi te manu. He ahara te manu, ko taku ringa te manu. Ka tū te toroa ahuta, ka hoka te toroa a tai.
Tēnā koe tōna. Before the bell rings, I'll leave you with two kōrero. So the woman you see there was when our men were returned home from the prisons, and our tupuna were very much into using ceremony as a way of laying down pain in exchange for peace, never laying down grief, because grief is a cycle and very natural to us to grieve. So we won't ever stop mourning, but definitely ceremony is very important, and that is something that I would encourage all Indigenous peoples to do as a way of moving forward. I referred to the rape of Parihaka woman. When we received the first Crown apology, it didn't have the rape of Parihaka woman in it. It had the prisoner's story, because theirs is largely documented. The Crown will never apologise for anything that it has no evidence of doing. So what is regarded as a historical fact will be apologised for, because it ends up in legislation. And so it came back with nothing in it, and I said, the story of our woman is in our songs, our waiata, our genealogy, our oral traditions. Te Whiti and Tohu returned from the prisons, and they saw the children running around the marae and said, "Nā wai nei ko pura pura." Who are these speckled potatoes? So the ko pura pura was a Māori variety of potato that had white specks in it. Who are these half-caste children? Who do they belong to? So you understand. And so I said to the Crown, it must have the rape and that word of Parihaka woman in the apology, or you can keep the package, of which there were 13 elements. I didn't have the authority to say that, but it worked for a few minutes. And I said, and don't come back with some watered down, diluted version, such as the violation of whakapapa, the violation of ancestry. That is a consequence of rape. So Christopher Finlayson and his team came back. and they said it would be acknowledged as a historical fact, therefore apologised for. When they rang to offer the news, I didn't say thank you. I said they deserve it. Our women, our grandmothers deserve it. No one should be thanked for apologising. So the tupuna Waitara that you see there, our ancestors, the second from the left is mine and Hinenui's great-great-grandmother, Te Whiri o Te Kōka, and they all wear the feathers of the albatross, as Tonga has said. And finally, the albatross, the torua, will spend years at sea. They shed the salt through their tear ducts. The bird, the albatross, we refer to those who have passed on as roimata torua, the tears of the albatross. So during the time when our lands were confiscated with Istala, our people were referred to as seagulls, confiscated, likened to flocks of seagulls who have no land. And Matua Raweri referred to that when seagulls congregate on a rock and then the waves come and they fly away. He said, welcome to the rock today in his kōrero. This is your place of refuge. And the torua also uses, when it comes into land, thermal updrafts. So it's lifted up by the warmth and it will only land in a safe environment. And so the challenge for us as nations, as peacekeepers, as scholars, for you, I'm not a scholar, is how are we contributing to that environment and habitat within which these symbols of resilience not only survive but thrive. We thank you for being here today. We hope you enjoy the kai. I will let Tonga do the outro. We have much more to say, but not enough time to share it. It is an honour. I can feel the powerful potential and skill in the room. I'm thinking in Māori and English is coming out. So anyway, I'll hand it back to Tonga. Thank you.
Tuna and I were leaders of a kapahaka group for the last 10 years. We revitalize our language through the medium of kapahaka, and we make sure that Parihaka kōrero is connected to the tribal kōrero. The tribal kōrero is connected to what's happening in the community. We resurrect that which is lost, that which is not in historical record. That is a critical space that we participate in. Rebuilding the identity of our whānau to ensure that they can walk forward in the world with the kōrero, the narratives of the ancestors on their shoulders. Here we have a photo of having fun, doing a haka for the king who arrived at Parihaka, King Tuheitia, and participating in a beautiful ceremony to welcome him. There's so much that has happened since the reconciliation. We are part of the national curriculum, Parihaka Mai. We want to have Parihaka education invested in there. Our infrastructure has unearthed hundreds of taonga. We're bound by contractual obligations to sweep through all that kōrero and push through it and make sure our marae are participating in the selection and retention of those taonga. Working with the Crown at the reconciliation is hard, but trying to redefine and reimagine ourselves in this time is difficult as well. So they have a hard job creating a new corporate identity that manages a lot of resource. That has been an amazing exercise of mobilizing our people since the reconciliation. They meet so many times during the week. It's voluntary, and the amount of work they do is amazing. So we're going to whakakapi ake konei. Leadership has evolved. Leadership will continue with our community. And I'll finish off with this kōrero of tohu kākahi. Okay. We want to choose someone to read the English.
Yes, my battle is for peace. All my strength and my voice is guidance to this generation, that you be the empower of both peoples. Your voice cannot be smothered by the authorities. Your voice cannot be silenced by the powerful or the turbulent events of this land. Should your voice be abolished, you will use tikanga to respond to the hatred, overcoming with kindness. Yeah, thank you.
E whakanganau mo te rangi Māori mo te pāngai makirunga I te whenua. Ko tōku kaha me tōku reo, hei reo whakahaere ki tēnei whakatupuranga. Hei tangata whakarāra koe mo ngā iwi e rua. E kore tōu reo e taia te pēhi e ngā maunga nunui. E kore tōu māngai e taia te kōpani e ngā maunga nunui, e ngā puke o te motunei. Ka hai papa I tōu reo, ka whakahaere tikanga koe o te kino kia mate I te pai. Ka waiata māua I te piukara. E nenui. Karamai.
Piki mai mare hoka tangi mai te piukara he tohurira na monga he pere te manawa he tae pati keti kete tae pai ngatu kohi he tae pape konga noka wana te manawa tuwi atu tuwi mai o tawa naire maringa he te oaro riki kwini tūtike maunawa piko mai he kawanako ahauto wariki ko e taku tono ngā he te kuini kai maunawa tuturu o whiti waka maua kia tīna haume ui e tēnā koutou.
Kia. Thank you both so much for your kōrero, your mahi, your vulnerability, your courage, and everything that you do. Long may it continue. Sorry. Kia. Cheers. Okay, so segue. Anybody that brought chairs from the wharekai, if you could please make sure that you bring it, take one with you. Papa. Let's do another pakipaki